Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Outside Looking In, the podcast series wherein I talk to somebody from out of market who's in another NBA market so that we can figure out, hey, what's going on with the other 29 teams in the NBA? And so that you, the listener, can kind of get the consensus on what the people around the NBA think of the Raptors. Today, Brenden Nunes of Sacktown Sports and King's Pulse, the second one being a podcast, very good podcast, which I've been on a couple months ago. And we're here to talk about the Raptors and the Kings, the upstart Kings, who were, one of the darlings of the NBA last season, and the Raptors, who were the darling or one of them the year prior, and then hit like a wall of sorts, and then had a bunch of stuff go wrong. And now the roster looks different, and it's a different coach. First thing I want to ask you, Brenden, how did the Kings avoid being that, like hitting the wall,
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. They brought back pretty much the same team. Like, I don't really see hitting a wall necessarily. If anything, I think that, like, the 3 seed that they were in last year is probably not a realistic expectation. Not even probably. In my mind, it's not. Like, 48 wins is nice. I don't think that's a typical 3 seed. And
the Suns
improving on
missed
win
the
total.
playoffs, like what, 2013 or 14 with 49 wins or something, or
Yeah,
48.
something crazy like that. Yeah, and the West is uber competitive. I think it was 2-6 was all Pacific Division teams last year, with the Kings somehow being at the top of that. So I think bringing back a lot of the same guys, not really having to change their style all too much. At least I don't think so. I don't think the Warriors necessarily gave people the blueprint or anything like that. I think that hitting a wall isn't necessarily something I'm all too concerned about, but I do think that from a fan base perspective, they haven't been in a position where they have expectations that are warranted and, throughout the entire fan base like they have gone into this year. And I think a little slump here and there might hurt the fan base a lot more than it maybe would have before.
They are looking for the same thing that they've been looking for years, a wing. And I think they achieve wingy things piecemeal. Some of the bigs on the roster kind of do a little bit more, like, maybe they put the ball down, just they shoot the ball every once in a while. They space the floor. The guards have to guard up. They can be pretty like staunch. There is this like a team that most of the fan base and the writers and the analysts are looking at it like, we hope there's a trade mid-season, like that's the ad.
I'm the one kind of thinking that eventually that will happen, but I think there was probably like 2 years, year and a half, where it's like, okay, writing is on the wall for Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley, to the point where it's like, this is probably affecting the rest of the team, not necessarily them as people, just the conversation, and everybody knows that it's just a matter of time. But they waited a long time to move those guys. They were very patient. So I do think that eventually it will be trading a lot of draft picks for a third guy, or maybe like a 3A, 3B with Keegan Murray if he pans out in the way that they're extremely optimistic about him. So I do think eventually, but I don't know that I'd bet on it being this year, but I do think they'll be aggressive in searching for that, but patient in making sure it's what they want.
We mentioned, well, when we talked in the summer, we were discussing possible trades, Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, chiefly among those trade talks, and the Kings being interested. Do you still look that way and think, wow, if we could figure something out?
Yeah, OG's still got to be the one. Excuse me. But where we got hung up in our conversation, and I'd imagine it wouldn't surprise me if this is the same way and through the front offices, is just the Keegan Murray conversation.
Yeah.
Like, the Kings are absolutely enamored with Keegan Murray, and I see it now. Like, I admittedly didn't really before. I don't know that I'm at the same level as them, but there's a lot of hype around the offseason work that he's done, the way he's been able to put the ball on the floor. It's really just got to be 1 or 2 dribbles, attacking closeouts and then making something happen from there. And I think we've seen enough flashes. Like, 140 ball in summer league isn't necessarily enough, but it was different, right? It wasn't done in the same way. And there's, albeit overreactions to that, but there's a lot of excitement around what he could potentially be. And I think that's where the conversation gets hung up.
Yeah, I think it wasn't your combo guard 40 ball, like your summer league combo guard 40 ball.
Right.
I think that makes sense. The Keegan Murray stuff, yeah, I think Raptors fans would be like, because everyone underrates talent elsewhere, and then everyone overrates talent at home. That's why fan bases couldn't complete trades. Front
Right.
offices have to at some point, but fan
I
bases
always
couldn't.
say if both fan bases hate the trade, that you probably got a decent one.
You're in like an okay spot, and I think the Raptors fans would be just completely irate with trading OG and having Keegan Murray be the centerpiece coming back, and I'm sure Kings fans would be irate
For
the
sure.
same way. But it doesn't seem like that's something. Just wanted to rehash that a little bit. The Siakam
Well, and
stuff,
yeah, and Siakam's part of that conversation too, right? I
except a
don't know.
bigger cost.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so talking about hitting a wall, the Raptors, they did, and they had a little bit of what the Kings did, where you said, they're returning so much of the same roster. When you look at, there's always statistical analysis. They always have their data models that say things like, when you return a large part of a roster, that means that, continuity is typically a really good indicator for future success, especially if you're a good team. The Raptors didn't do it. The hope is that the Kings can do the thing that is statistically modeled as a version of success, and that the Raptors failed at. But when you look at this Raptors team, do you think that given that they struggled so much last year, but made a trade for Jakob Poeltl, finished since getting Poeltl on like a 47-48 win pace, they're restarting the season with a new coach, with functionally Dennis Schroeder and Jalen McDaniels instead of Fred VanVleet, and Grady Dick on the team. What do you make of them?
I don't really know what to make of them, to be honest. They seem confusing from a perspective of somebody that wasn't watching them extremely closely last year.
That's like the fourth or fifth I'm confused about the Raptors answer out of like 9-10 interviews so far.
Yeah, and I don't think it's so black and white that you need to commit to like, are you win now or are you embracing youth movement? But it does seem a little like too much on both sides in a way. Like I think you could just lean a little bit more towards one, maybe. And Van Vliet going, which makes sense. That was a lot of money that he got from Houston,
You
obviously.
can't match it.
No.
You
And
can't
Dennis
touch it.
Schroeder balled out in FIBA, but like he always balls out when he plays for Germany. I think it's like Patty Mills with Australia and Dennis Schroeder with Germany. Like those two guys just go crazy.
And now Shea with Canada.
Yes.
He was awesome.
Yes. So, I'm interested to see some of the development of like how much is the ball in Scotty Barnes's hands? What sort of differences are we going to see with Darko at the helm? I very much would have been intrigued to see what it was with Jordi, but still going to be keeping tabs with Darko, obviously. And they have a lot of size. Like I'm a guy that when I play my 2K, I'm a my team guy, and I'm just trying to get all the wings possible and switch everything. That is how I like to play and how I like to experience basketball. And so the Raptors interest me from that perspective, but the half court offense, like what is that going to look like?
That's you mentioned Jordi. Obviously, I only expressed this. There's no reason you would know other than if you saw a tweet, but handsome bald guy. I wanted him. I've started my relationship with Darko in a good spot. I like him a lot. There's been, he has more stuff in the public consciousness of like podcasts he's done, articles he's written about his thoughts on basketball. But having Jordi come along afterwards and be like, Team Canada, Nick Nurse is out of the country, I got you. That meant a lot. And so it's so funny because Jordi starts off in the public consciousness, Canadians, they just love the guy now, obviously. It's their best finish by a mile, and they beat the United States to do it, and they have all these stars, and he had like 2 months to prepare. And so everyone's like, Darko, what have you done for me lately? But I don't know, it's the off season. It's not like he can do much. I think it's funny.
It's funny to me that Jordi took that job. Like I always am curious how these came about. Like Jay Triano being right next to Jordi on Sacramento's roster. I'm like, was there communication there, or like, I don't know. I'm curious how that ended up working out the way it did.
I do think there was, and I also think that there was preliminary conversations when Jordi was talking with the Raptors that, you're already in the vicinity. Might as well, because Nick Nurse obviously was leaving, got fired, and as much as everybody was like, he still has a commitment to Canada, there was no way. And so everybody is kind of, trying to juggle this thing while it's, still moving. and Jordi ended up being the guy who can juggle so many things at once. Anyway, good for Jordi. I know you guys love him in Sacramento.
Yes.
When anytime anybody talked about him, whether it was like, it doesn't matter what team was interviewing him, the Raptors or be it anybody else, everyone's like, Jordi is the best. He's gonna rock. And whoever picks him up, they got a good one.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the size. The Raptors, this is a question I've been asking everybody. What do you think the defensive ceiling is? And you don't have to pick the number for the defensive rating, but there's like 1 through 5, 5 through 10, etc. What do you think their range is?
I mean, it's got to be pretty close to the roof, right?
Yeah.
Like I guess the perimeter containment's there too. Like you have the bigger wings that can take care of those guards. Pirtle obviously is a really solid backline there. I guess it's some of like what are the bench pieces that are coming in, but I think like there's a lineup that is elite defensively. As a team, maybe when you get to the bench, it starts to fall off a little bit, but there's a lineup that's got to be flirting with top 5.
I think the bench stuff comes down to, how does Grady do? How well are they able to keep him away from the on-ball stuff and still, get some positives out of his pretty good defensive awareness off ball? He's got slow feet, though. You want to keep him away from the action if you can. Is Otto Porter Jr. healthy? Because if Otto Porter Jr. is healthy, the last time he was in a championship rotation and played a similar spot on the Warriors as he will with the Raptors.
Mike Brown has talked very highly about what Otto Porter did for that Warriors team and how much of their fall off, like he really pointed towards, Otto Porter and Gary Payton not being there at the beginning of last year.
Yeah. Like Otto Porter, if healthy, is great. His toe was missing for 18 months, something like that, which was tough pill to swallow for a team that didn't shoot well or defend well in that stretch. And as you mentioned, like they'll have a very, very strong lineup. I think they were between 4 and 6 since trading for Pirtle. Fred VanVleet had a better defensive stretch since Pirtle came over. But I also think losing VanVleet, and if the starting lineup ends up being that they just move Scotty to point guard, and maybe you lose a little bit in containment, but you have so much size in rotation at the nail and at the rim, and length to recover out once you pinch in. I think that the defense will get better once, like with Fred gone. Now that's because he's a far cry from where he was defensively. Schroeder, despite not being like a world beater defensively and has fallen off a little bit of where he was, because he was a very strong guard defender, I think is still, relative to a lot of guards, a positive, even if he's not going to make all defense or anything like that. I think the defense should be really good. As you said, like the roof, it seems like it's the roof.
Yeah. And like to your point with Schroeder, like when you have that sort of help defense, you can be that much more physical and like an annoyance as a point of attack defender.
The thing I want to ask about, though, we're talking about the roof, the backcourt with the Kings, Monk, Fox. We got those playoff. Malik is great, man. They had that playoff performance. Do you think that garners more like possessions for him this upcoming season? Do you think like they look for that more often? And if so, do you think that the Kings with Fox and Monk could actually be in consideration for like a top 5, top 3 backcourt in the NBA?
Well, I still think they're going to roll with Herter. I think that we see Monk ideally in like 6 man of the year conversations and still closing games. It's situational, like who's closing, him versus Herter. I do think that obviously his secondary playmaking is really important, but I think that if like in that Warriors series specifically, if Sabonis is confident and comfortable knocking down that mid-range shot, which he said that he's absolutely planning on working on that. And I think we've seen him do it before. It's just like, it wasn't
Gonzaga.
Part of his typical rhythm. Right. He absolutely has done it before. I think it's going to be there. But if that's there in that Warriors series, they play up on him a little bit more, and he can function as that secondary playmaker a lot better in my mind. So I think it's situational, to go back to Monk, when he'll be closing games compared to Kevin Herter, or maybe you see both of them at the same time on certain nights. But I think that Fox could even, keyword could, like could just stay at the same level, but I think he could go to another level. He's 25.
Yeah.
Like he's still extremely young, and he very much was a, ramp up, figure out the game plan from the opposing defense, and then by the fourth quarter, okay, I've got it down, I'm going to just go off. But if he does that in the first half, that maybe you see a little bit more if he can lock in a little bit more defensively and just clean up some of these small things, right? Everybody's going to point to the 3-point shooting, obviously, but I think there's other aspects that he could clean up and take another step. Herder as well. Herder, Malik, and De'Aaron are all right around 25, 26. So all of these guys could end up taking another step. And I think when it comes to just how dynamic and versatile offensively a backcourt can be, Fox and Monk side by side have to be in that conversation. I imagine there's others above them, to be honest. I can't think off the top of my head, but they're definitely up there.
I think as far as if you're not getting like a first team All NBA guard or something like that, uh, having a guy like Fox, whose game is very clearly going to be able to ratchet up because of his comfortability in the mid range in the playoffs, and you're going to miss out on some of the easy efficiency that regular season defenses allow because of like just the walk into threes, it's more laissez-faire, and De'Aaron, like to his credit in the playoffs, can continue ratcheting things up when they get more difficult, but also isn't always making things as easy as it seems it could be during the regular season. Monk and Fox both seem overwhelmingly like, and not to be too much into the, the cliche, but the playoff players. And then Herder is a guy who, you talk about like 82 game players. He struggled, but Herder is a guy who I hope he has like way better playoffs this time around. But the regular season for sure, like that true shooting was through the roof. He was giving you like heaps and heaps of points. He was just running through these basic actions and making them dangerous against these base coverages. The Kings seem like a very safe bet with all they do around Sabonis to win like a bunch of games. But that adaptability in the playoffs, do you think that there's other guys on the roster who can kind of match and meet, I guess, Monk and Fox's ability last season to kind of ratchet things up against more difficult coverage?
Maybe Duarte can work his way into the conversation. I'm not the most confident in it. He likes his mid-range. I think there's going to be moments of frustration regarding that, but he can put the ball on the deck and make something happen when he needs to. I think need to see it a little bit more, and specifically how he fits in the system. That's not just going to come out in the playoffs if he's not a regular in the rotation leading up to that point. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm actually very interested in how he could work out in this equation, because they have defensive shortcomings, obviously. Very, like, honestly, just horrible defensively last year, and having the best offense in the league when it comes to offensive rating made up for that. But you look at a closing lineup, and it's Fox and one of Herder or Monk, and then Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. And if you can slide Duarte into there some games to close instead of Herder or Monk, you might improve decently defensively, because Herder and Monk are the two guys that opposing offenses are looking at and like, give me him, and kind of doing what they want, So I'm interested to see how that sort of works. And I think they hope that the other guy is Keegan Murray.
Yeah.
Harrison Barnes has his moments of 6 free throws in half a quarter just to calm the pace down, get everybody level headed again, and sort of try to regain control and momentum of a game. But they hope it's Keegan Murray. I don't think that we see it yet. The comp that he's used for himself, and I start to see a little more and more, or believe in that as a potential outcome more and more, is Chris Middleton. And, just efficient with his dribbles. I don't think that you're getting these tween crosses with Keegan Murray right now necessarily, but attack the closeout. And when you get to the rim, don't try to double clutch, like dunk it. When they first drafted him, Monty McNair said at his press conference right after drafting him, one of the things he highlighted was his dunk percentage and just how efficient he was. It's not like he's throwing it down on people, but he's just putting it in the basket, the most efficient shot in basketball. And this year he was like hesitant. And Summer League, that was one of the things. Right from the jump, he threw it down on somebody. And it was like, okay, that's a little different. Now do that against full NBA rosters. So I think they hope it can eventually be Keegan Murray. But I don't really think there's that much reason to believe that last year's weaknesses won't be this year's weaknesses.
Sure. That's something that Keegan can emulate from OG, for example, though. OG, doesn't really have good touch in the floater range. He doesn't really have good touch as far as like layups and stuff like that. But year in, year out, he's going to shoot 70+% from like the 0 to 3 feet or 0 to 4 feet. I don't know if you're Basketball Reference or Cleaning the Glass guy, but you know, just dunk the ball and you'll make a lot of shots. I mean, every once in a while you get it, pushed back on you, but hey, them's the breaks. I was going to ask, what do you think garners a better record during the regular season? A bottom 10 offense with a top 5 defense, or a top 5 offense with a bottom 10 defense?
Ooh,
Because I think that's the two teams we're talking about, or roughly around
this
that.
Question. I wish it was defense, but I think it's offense in the regular season. In the postseason, I don't know who gets further.
Probably
right?
probably neither get out of the first round.
That's a good answer. Because I'm a big believer in like you can be consistent as a team if you play good defense, because you can do that every single night. Offensively, you're gonna have nights where the shots just don't go in. Now, Sacramento had so many shooters on this roster that it was pretty rare, to be fair, a lot rarer than I thought it would be. But there's going to be games where that doesn't work. And it's like, okay, well, can you lock up and get a stop? So I think that's where you can find consistency. But in today's NBA, I feel like it's got to be offense for regular season.
Well, there's that old, saying, it's like defense travels, something like that, I guess. But also, if you score a bunch, you make sure that other teams are taking the ball out of their basket, which helps out on defense a lot. And then, if you get a lot of stops, you would think that you get to push a lot, and you can, but your transition offense is not necessarily guaranteed. And that's something that the Raptors ran into last year, is that they weren't as efficient in transition as they needed to be, despite getting out in transition a ton. And not every stop is a transition look. I think in the regular season, the better offense wins more games. And obviously between these two teams, the margins are obviously going to have if Sacramento was number 1 on offense and the Raptors are like between 4 and 7 defensively, there's an edge there for one team and not the other. And then the Raptors, I think they finished 12th in offensive rating by the end of the season, even though they were bottom 5 in half-court offensive rating. I have no idea what it's going to look like this year. Like, if they snuck into the top half offensively, I'd be very impressed. And same thing goes for if the Kings sneak past like 22, I'd be like, wow, defensive changes, they worked.
I agree. And Summer League assistant coach Luke Laugs, coach of the Summer League team, was just talking about physicality. And, that wasn't just a Summer League thing. That's what they are hoping will be the difference maker for this team defensively going into next year. And we saw that Warriors series was extremely physical. And I think that was part of what happened with Kevin Huerter and why Kevin Huerter really struggled to shoot the ball. He's just exerting so much effort defensively that his legs weren't really there on offense. And he kind of acknowledged that he needs to get in better shape. And that's certainly not to say he was in bad shape. The way that guy is sprinting around the floor on both ends just all the time, but chasing Klay Thompson on one end, being physical, and then trying to do it yourself on the other end, I think had an impact. So I think that, betting on just being a more physical team is maybe not the best formula, but they only have so many options. And if they really, really embrace that, I'm interested to see how that affects their offense.
Is there anybody outside of Duarte that you think, like, this guy could surprise people? This guy, because that's what Sacramento was last year, was just Fox was way better than, a lot of people thought. Sabonis, obviously, with the keys to the offense as the hub, was way better. Their glut of guys who run and shoot and like sprint off of dribble handoffs. Is there anybody waiting in the wings that you think would surprise people this year?
Absolutely. Sasha Vezenkov, EuroLeague MVP, coming over. I think it's reasonable for people to not be the most educated on him. Like OKC brought in a EuroLeague guy that I still need to have a way better understanding of before the season comes around. But Sasha Vezenkov, EuroLeague MVP. They've had his draft rights for about 2 years, and he's just continued to get better. I think they actually traded a late second-round pick 2 or 3 drafts ago to get his draft rights. He was initially the 50th something pick to the Nets, his rights years ago, and he's just continued to get better. And last year ended up EuroLeague MVP on a team that really plays a very similar offense to Sacramento. A lot of split cuts, and he shoots the lights out with an extremely quick release. And the thing that got really pointed out to me is how efficient he is with his dribbles. He's not somebody that's, beating people off the bounce. It's all these like subtle fakes that you like don't even think should actually beat somebody, but he's just smooth with it enough and has such a threat of that deep ball that when he does get downhill, he's got good touch with both hands. Another lefty. The Kings just love their lefties, apparently. And I'm very interested to see how he works alongside Domantas Sabonis. There's going to be an adjustment, but I think there's going to be some nights where he just explodes offensively and needs to be closing games. But another guy where, notice I didn't talk about his defense at all.
That's what kept them over there.
What's that?
The defense, you reckon?
No, he wanted to, or the Kings wanted him to come over for the last couple seasons, and he was hesitant. We had his press conference within about a month, and he said that seeing the team improve the way it did last year, and he just really wants to be in a winning setting. That did a lot for him in his decision. So they've wanted him for a little while.
Cool. I love that. The Raptors. It's like a 3 years ago and farther back thing now, but Nando De Colo, for years they were like, man, if you want to come over, we have your rights. We would love to have you. He was, he's still good, but he was really fantastic for a long time. A question I have for you. I'm going to list some names, and I'll kind of want to hear your preference. So it's the glut of wing-sized bigs or big-sized wings, however you want to frame it. It's the meme, it's the small boulder, the size of a large boulder, or whatever it is. That's the Raptors team building philosophy. So Otto Porter Jr., Chris Boucher, Thaddeus Young, Jalen McDaniels, Precious Achiuwa, and I think, we'll leave it there. Does anybody pop out to you? You're like, okay, this guy for sure, minutes.
Well, I think it depends how he looks, but I think Otto Porter is a guy that every team would love to have if he, gets back to somewhat close to what he was like in Golden State. Just not somebody that you're asking to do too much, but just a little bit of everything on both ends of the floor. And the size that he has, I think people can forget or not realize just how big and long he is as a player. So that is extremely interesting to me. And, I kind of am interested in Jalen McDaniels. He's very raw, but he, again, another one of these guys, I guess it's just the whole Raptors roster, but a lot of length and potential defensively. Like, I think that I've seen him get bullied a little bit, and the three-point shot definitely needs to be ironed out, but I have some interest there. And that's not to say that I don't with these other guys. I really liked Precious Achiuwa at the time of the draft. And it was so funny. Everybody's like, oh, is he a small forward or what is he? I'm like, no, I think this guy's a center.
He thinks he's a shooting
or
guard
a four.
for what it's worth.
Yeah, which, maybe that's part of the process here, I guess. But he's intriguing to me. But I do kind of think of more as of a big, and maybe hasn't shown quite as much as I would have initially thought since the draft. But I do still have some intrigue there. But where do you get the developmental minutes for him, right?
This is the thing. The Raptors front court is jam-packed. Like, Precious Achiuwa coming off of, I know, like, you've seen conversations Raptors fans have had. You've talked to me enough times to hear absurd Precious Achiuwa propaganda, especially coming out of the season where they had a puncher's chance against Philly, let's say. He played a massive role as the center. He was tremendous defensively. He shot like 44% on threes in the second half of the season on like 5 attempts a game. Everything is trending. And he's punching these like posters on everybody, every game. Everything's trending in the right way. Last season went horrible. And so he might not even be able to carve out the role he wants. Jalen McDaniels obviously chose this team because he thought, I'm going to fit into their love of wings with like a lot of length. I'll get a lot of easy looks out of the corners. I'll have a bunch of opportunities to make plays defensively. He might not get to carve out a situation. Pirtle is there. Siakam is there. Scotty is there. They have to work, Grady in. OG is there, of course. Like Thaddeus Young, he's not playing. Obviously. Chris Boucher, he's getting paid the same amount as Dennis Schroeder. Like he's like a mid-level type contract.
I
What
remember
the
conversations about him and Rashawn Holmes.
Yeah, man. Like what the hell? I don't if a couple guys pop off, they could have themselves a winning season for sure. But I'm very interested to see what happens because and I got to tell you, you're on the outside looking in here, but I don't think anybody has any inkling on who's going to take those spots and run with them over on this side either.
Do you think of it as like more likely than not just everybody gets a shot and who sticks?
I think that's how it's going to shake out because I don't know why Darko would have any allegiance to any of the fledgling guys. Like Chris
Right.
Boucher, Precious Achua, for better or for worse, Thaddeus Young, they had played with Nick Nurse and had shown him something, and there's like that shared history and bad shared history in some respects for some of those players. But you know, like Darko probably he looks at Otto as like a stabilizing force, says this is good, you shoot well. He's probably going to get the first shot. But if Precious Achua is, making a lot of mistakes on the court on both sides, if he's not playing his best, if Chris Boucher is having a tough time inputting himself, like of course it should probably go. It's going to go to Jalen, and then maybe they want to play even bigger and go to like Christian Koloko or something. But none of that, I think, is. They even have Mohamedou Goy or Guy. I can't remember how that's said. I learned it at Summer League, but they have guys even on the G League or the two-way situation. So it's like I don't really know.
And I will say, like Mike Brown, obviously it's different. He had NBA ties prior, but like came in with, seemingly some prior relationships like Casey Okpala and Chima Moneki specifically, and Chimezi Metu, but Chimezi Metu was already there. But all three of those guys played for him on the Nigerian national team that beat Team USA that one year. And ironically, also Jordi Fernandez was an assistant on that team, and so was assistant Luke Laux. But, very quickly, KZ Okpala started the first 4 games, and it was like, all right, well, Keegan Murray's obviously the guy here. Like Keegan just played well enough, and you replaced him. And, so even if there is maybe some prior thoughts or relations between Darko and whatever players, like can change fast, right?
Yeah, the guys will have to prove it, and I'm
Right.
sure there'll be opportunities, especially if they're trying to move. Well, especially since they're going to have less pick and roll play. Like the half court offense is going to be more hub-y or hub adjacent because they Dennis Schroeder isn't going to run as many pick and rolls as Fred VanVleet had been. And Fred VanVleet wasn't running that many pick and rolls anyway. Pascal Siakam wasn't. And it's easier for guys to kind of plug into those hubs to run off of stuff. Yeah, as you say, like split cuts, dribble handoff. They'll run a ton of delay, I'm sure, be it with, Jakob or Scotty as the trigger man. Guys will have opportunities to kind of plug in. I guess we'll see what happens. This is the question I want to ask you too, because you watched the team or the best offense, a ton of them, like all of them last season, and they leaned harder into the hub stuff than even the Nuggets do, right? The Nuggets even run like a little bit more prototypical offense at times than the Kings do. Do you think that the NBA has kind of been waiting for this? That it was in the spread pick and roll stuff for so long that the Kings doing it kind of piecemeal without a ton of stars shows, teams or team builders that there's a higher offensive, I guess, output here if you just switch into like a little bit more of a egalitarian play through the bigs.
I think you just have to have the right players. So maybe the NBA transitions into a way where, the same way that we're seeing all these like larger 6'8" guys that, from an early age are like, I can be a point guard. And so you see those. So maybe in due time, we'll see more bigs that can pass in this way. But I think it's pretty unique that like Mike Brown was able to come over and implement this very similar to Golden State offense. Not, copy and paste, but there's a lot of similarities because Draymond can really, really pass. And obviously Sabonis fits into that as well. But I really think there's only so many guys that you can run that properly with right now. Like when Sabonis is not out there, their offense takes a big hit and you make up for it defensively. But it's not quite the same. They still try to run the same offense just with pick and rolls rather than DHOs, but it's not as crisp, right? Those backdoor cuts are not getting hit in the same with the same speed. And so I don't know how replicable it is unless you have the proper big / forward to do it.
Okay, so this is perfect. Do you think Scotty's good enough to do it?
Probably. And I mean, the first guy I thought of is Pascal.
Probably he faces up too often, Like he's too score first. Like
right.
It's Scotty has had it happened in like the start of January to roughly until they traded for Jakob, which changed the complexion of the offense. But they went through a phase where they did a lot of dribble handoff stuff with Scotty, and they were playing bad teams at the time, but it looked pretty good. And the reads, like he makes great reads. He is not the screener that Sabonis is, obviously, or that Draymond is, but year 2, I guess we'll see.
Right.
But
he definitely has the potential to do it.
That's kind of that's what I've been, even if it's not their full offense, why wouldn't you run, like that's how you weaponize guys who don't dribble that well. Like if you just, even in a pick and roll, you have to be able to manipulate and shift your defender to come off the screen correctly. You have to do it with a live dribble. If it's easier for Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby to navigate these things as a scorer with less dribbles, I mean, what the hell? I'm pretty sure, obviously, Domantas Sabonis and Fox and Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray were ranked extremely highly for like the handoff stuff. Same with Bam and somebody else I can't remember. I don't think it was Gabe Minson. But I think the 4th best handoff pairing in the NBA last season was Gary Trent Jr. and Scotty per the points per possession or whatever. It's very interesting. But I want to ask because, you watch more big man hub stuff than like anybody,
It's a joy to watch, though, I got to say. It is gorgeous offense. They move the ball amazingly well. Ball reversals are a big part of their offense as well. And they just keep everybody involved. Like early in the year, Kevin Huerter's quote that I just repeated over and over because I think it's a great way to put it is he was just like, the ball is power. And I don't think that it's a coincidence he's saying this coming from an Atlanta offense that, was very pick and roll heavy, and he was probably standing around a lot more than he is in Sacramento. But getting those touches does so much for guys just mentally, just feeling it a little bit, and feeling like you're a part of it. That impacts how hard you're going to cut every single possession. Like the Kings always talked about their pace, not only in the full court, but in the half court, like sprinting through their actions and their cuts. And I think you totally saw that. But the ball movement and running that sort of offense, I think really does leak over into guys' efforts on the defensive end.
I don't know. It's anybody who's played any sport ever. It's like when you feel more involved, there's, the ball is power. It's a great quote.
I realized right as I said it how ironic it is because the Kings were obviously horrible on defense, but they tried. They
could have been even worse. Like
they definitely could have.
That's the sell. It's like you look at the personnel and you say it's incredible they got even to this point. The Sabonis screen, the leave behind, it's starting to populate around the NBA a lot. How cool is that to as big men who work in screens, it's not often that you get kind of like a signature and it can go the wrong way, like Rudy Gobert being like, screen assist merchant and people, killing him for years. But Sabonis has a cool screen thing, and it's not the Steven Adams screen assist merchant thing either. It's like a completely separate thing.
Yeah, it's funny because you saw at the beginning of the year guys like not fully being ready for it. You just have to, it's not even necessarily being ready for it. It's just like go through your action and think that the ball might be there. I don't know how he's going to get it there, but like the screen will be fully set and the ball will somehow be in your hands and you're already past the screen. And Kevin Huerter was easily the best 2-man game that I felt like existed there when it came to that. Like Kevin is just absolutely sprinting off these down screens and going into that. And other guys started to pick up on it too. I think obviously with De'Aaron, them both getting to play on the right side of the court as lefties, I think is just extremely helpful. And just the little stuff that, you're so used to as a defender dealing with right-handed players and taking away things for that way. And I think just having to think half a second more because you're dealing with lefties sometimes, again, more of a regular season thing, might have benefited them a little bit, but it's really cool to see Domas do that, man. Like, one of the underrated aspects is that when he knows he's setting a screen, he's not jogging up there to set it. Like, he is running up there to get that screen set. They're trying to preserve every second of the shot clock that they can. And he's just the most selfless guy possible. Like, his screens have got to hurt. De'Aaron was just on a podcast, Deuce and Mo podcast, shout out. That was a phenomenal podcast, and talked about how he knew how much these screens were going to free him up because he remembers running into them and they hurt. And Domas takes pride in that and will do it every single night. You know, it hurts the other guy, but obviously it's got to have some sort of physical impact on Domas, but it does not look like it does at all. It's amazing how he's able to set guys up in that fashion. And he'll fake it. Like, the entire time the ball's in his hand, he's like palming it and it's just constantly moving and faking. Like, it's so hard to figure out where he's going with it. And that's what they want to do with their offense. They want it to be unguardable because there's not a set, you're doing this on this play. It's just all read and react.
I think it's one of the coolest because everybody who's played pickup, and it's not the same at the NBA level, of course, but this can help illustrate. Try and get a guard to set you a screen. They will plant it like 1 out of 15 times. And even a big is going to get and pick up like 4 out of 15. Everybody and their mom who watches the NBA now sees big men who can't screen. And the reason why, like, the leave behind is that you would think, oh, obviously I should do this. That's simple. It isn't the passing talent that enables that. I'm sure, like, it helps, but it's the awareness of the coverage you're seeing and knowing if I leave this ball behind me, I'm not letting the guy shoot the gap. And it's the confidence in the screen craft that lets him just leave it. The ball will be over there. Like, go run and get it. I'm going to make sure he's to be, as you say, like, brutish in your screening, that De'Aaron's like, holy smokes, this guy, I'm hitting a wall, but also like those like light feet to make sure you're always in the right spot. And that is not this egregious moving screen. It's a lot of talent, and it isn't, the common focused on talent in the NBA, but it's such a unique way to help kind of, move offense forward and move the game forward. And I know it's been happening, like, there are these fledgling attempts at doing that. Some guys have done it, but he's doing it at the highest rate, most effectively in the history of the league at this point. And it's a small thing, but it's a cool thing. And yeah, I just wanted to appreciate that. It's neat.
Agreed. Caitlin Clark, I think at one point when he was in Indiana, did a amazing piece about like angles of screening when it came to Domas. And if anybody has not read that, absolutely check it out.
Basically anything Caitlin Cooper does is like, it's just gonna,
agreed. Yeah. I said Caitlin Clark, huh? Caitlin Cooper.
Caitlin Cooper, of course. Always read Caitlin Cooper, ARCC, coined by Evan Gilberto, I believe. The best writer doing it. And she'll be on for the Indiana episode for people who are listening to every one of these. But yeah, the best. You could point to like 16 different things she wrote about Domas
for sure.
While he was, It's cool offense, as you say. It's a dream to watch. I have friends. I have other people. My friend Makai, he was begging me. He's like, let me do the Kings episode. He asked me last year. He asked me this year. I said, nope, not letting you do it. Obviously, I'm talking to you. But people love the Kings. Like, it's a fun team to root for. They got the sauce, man.
How long do you think that'll last? I kind of think it's a 1-year thing, and like there's already going to be people that sour on them, but it will still be a majority that I think are rooting for them. But I think that changes fast, right?
They're not new anymore,
right?
I think it's people will be like, okay, we get it, because the Jazz were incredible. Like, they killed offensively for years, and I think the Kings get one more year. Yeah. They're not like the darlings. Not everyone's like, oh my God, it's the genius basketball down in Sacramento. You guys don't have to worry about that much because you guys have such great fans and such like a ferociously passionate fan base for that team anyway. But if they lose in the first round again, I think people will do what they always do, which I hate, but they're just going to say like, oh, it's a toy offense, like whatever.
Agreed.
But I don't know. People are very zero sum about the NBA, which, you don't get to appreciate the mix of the leave behind with the screen craft if you're zero sum, or, De'Aaron Fox's incredible, pace, all that kind of stuff. Everyone gets tired of everything. but yeah, them's the breaks, I
Not us.
suppose. Not
Not
us.
us.
I get tired of some things. I'm gonna be honest.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
fair. Me too.
but not the NBA wide, I suppose. But Brenden, I guess that's as good a place to leave it as any. Do you have any parting shots? Could be Raptors adjacent, could be King stuff. Could be whatever you want. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
We got to make sure to say hi next time in Summer League.
We didn't. Well,
I think I missed you.
said hi. We were like, "Hey, I'm here. Where are you?"
Yeah.
But the schedule was not friendly.
It was not. No. Yeah, I did see. I talked to Josh a little bit, I think, after you left, and he was sharing the court you guys found on the way back from the Grand Canyon.
Oh,
and I forget who it was that posted pictures. It looked gorgeous.
Yeah, man. It was that would have been me, I suspect, because I have my Fujifilm camera out there. I was snapping pics, but it was awesome. And we also found a run, the YouTuber / writer run, and we ran it, man. Ooh, we did good. Josh is the best too. I'm glad you guys linked up, because Josh, I think, actually he introduced me to your work like 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Because I was like, hey, I'm looking for a Kings guy, and he was like, this guy. I met him at
Cal Classic, Summer
Classic.
League.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then so I was like, oh, let me go check it out. And I was like, oh, this guy's work is fantastic. And
yeah, shout out Josh.
That work. Sacktown Sports, Kings Pulse, if anybody wants it. Brenden, for anybody who wants to pay attention to one of the coolest, most offensively functional teams in the league, Brenden Nunes. That's the way to do it. Brenden, how's that feel? Like a podcast?
It does feel like a podcast. Thanks, Sam.
We did it. All right, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more of these. Hope you enjoyed this one. I've said that twice now. That's a good way to sign off.
But for real, hope you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Bye, everybody.